I mean, we think about finance and we think about climate change. Do you think that climate change really matters to people in finance?
I think it does for two reasons. One, climate change represents a lot of risk. If you're an insurance company, your risk in insuring most of the east coast of the United States has changed as a result of climate change. Look at what happens at Miami Beach, where a huge amount of money in the past 5 years has gone into building new condos. And yet, virtually every high tide, many of the streets in Miami Beach have water coming in from the sea, and the pumps can't get it out fast enough. That's clear risk. But there is also going to be reward. And as a result of COP, and by that I mean the Conference of Parties in Paris, there's going to be rewards too. Companies that can help the globe, the United States, the EU, developing countries, find ways of decarbonizing their economies are going to be companies that do well.
I want to switch gears here and talk a little bit about China, given you've done a lot of work there in your work over the past couple years. And I'm just curious what your view is on the role that China will play now and ongoing as it impacts climate change.
That is a wonderful question, and it's one that I hope I can answer well. Two things. One of which is that China has changed its posture towards its global leadership on climate change. Up until the agreement between President Xi and Obama, China had been largely obstructionist, and they were the country behind which most of the developing nations hid because they didn't want to play a role in coming up with targets because they thought that it was economically unfair, since accurately the developing world had accounted for roughly 70% of the greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere today. China recognized, now as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, that they needed to do something, and it was in their interest to take a positive leadership role. So 6 or 7 months before the Paris COP, they announced what they were going to do, and they were going to come up with their own commitments, which was, I think, very significant. And the Chinese, for domestic reasons, recognize they have a very serious pollution problem. The mayor of Beijing announced, this city is unlivable because the pollution is so intense. And from time to time when I go there, and it's sort of that grayish and sometimes yellowish mixed with sand from the desert, it's just unbearable. So they recognize they have to do something about it.
So I have one more question for you, Ted. So we think about the millennials and we think about ourselves, all of us. What would be the call to action that you'd ask us to do to contribute to this effort?
I think the call to action, to me, the holy grail in dealing with this is, can we come up with market solutions? Remember, I'm a banker, so I want to see a market solution. I'm not necessarily comfortable totally with a regulatory approach, so we want to see market solutions that are going to work. We tried cap and trade. That didn't get through, and it was pretty clear to me, even though I supported it, it would never get through the Senate, and there's some good reasons, which I'll explain in a moment, why that was the case. But we need market solutions, and one of which I think makes a lot of sense is a tax on carbon. And a tax on carbon represents some wonderful opportunities for us to do things that we need to get done. A tax that makes the cost of emitting more carbon expensive. So you're taxing something that you don't want to see more of, you want to see less of. That in itself makes a lot of sense. That is using taxes to meet important social objectives. But it also, over time, and you want to be careful about this, could be a source of needed income for the government to do things like invest in infrastructure. So we're not living up to our potential. I think we're doing well, but the potential we have in this country isn't being met. And in my opinion, a tax on carbon would be one of the ways that we can get more funds to carry out the kinds of investments that we need to do.
What gives you hope as you think about our climate moving forward for generations to come?
Well, two things. One of which is that if you're facing a problem, I just constitutionally don't want to say the problem is insolvable. I believe it is solvable, and I want to run and act as if it can be solved. But I also have an immense degree of confidence, ultimately, in the American public. Winston Churchill, I think, encapsulated this wonderful, lovely quote. He said, the Americans, you can always count on them doing the right thing after they've tried every other choice. And we're a little bit like that. So we're getting there, and we're seeing the American public, the people who believe and recognize it's a challenge, are getting it.
So thank you, Ted. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I've learned a lot. I feel inspired, and I'm hopefully all of our viewers feel the same. So thank you for taking the time with us today.
Well, Patsy, quite to the contrary, thank you. This has been a privilege to be interviewed by you, and I hope, as you do, that the viewers enjoy it.